Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Nerves podcast. I am Bats, and I'm going to be taking a first look at Briar Sovereign's Armour, Astir Advent. It's a mecha tabletop role-playing game, and as you can see from the art, it is anime-inspired in some ways. I'm not exactly sure in what those ways are yet, but we will find out. But this art, I just have to say, this is the main reason that I purchased this game. I bought it yesterday because it was on sale, and I saw this art, and I was like, this is like if you took that Lancer art that everybody was kind of going crazy over and threw it through like a Gurren Lagann filter, and you get something that is both stylistically the same in the way that it's like that sci-fi Star Wars collation of characters, but also something that has an entirely different tone. So like if you were to put those games side by side, and I'm only comparing them because Lancer is sort of, the big mecha game that's out right now. If you were to put them side by side, you could kind of look at both of them and see that this game definitely has its own tone and Lancer definitely has its own tone. So maybe we can find, what that tone exactly is trying to say as we read through this. Like I said, it is by Briar Sovereign. They are on Twitter. I believe they have written a few other things that are on Itch. I have not read any of those either. This is the first thing of theirs that I have read. I believe also that this was kickstarted. I'm not positive on that, but I believe it was kickstarted. I went ahead and opened up the PDF now, and we're just going to scroll on down to the table of contents page. There's a few pages before that. It looks like there is some information about the playtesting. There's even like an FAQ about the playtesting, and there's also a little quick setup guide, but we're not going to quickly set up this game. We're going to go through the whole thing. So looking at the table of contents, this is a pretty substantial book, getting close to 160 pages, and it looks like it covers everything from the playbooks, so this is powered by the Apocalypse, to agendas and principles for the Game Master, which I believe they are calling the Director here, because I can see Director moves here on the contents page. Everything from playbooks to Director tools. So what we're going to be doing as we look through this is we're going to be trying to figure out what story is this game trying to tell. And this might just be my particular outlook on Powered by the Apocalypse, but when it comes to those style of games, like with the playbooks and the moves, I always take them as like a pitch, almost like a television pitch. When I'm looking through this book and I'm reading the moves, when I'm looking at the playbooks, when I'm looking at what the director is supposed to be doing, I'm thinking about how these things can help tell stories, how they can create something at the table, because one thing that Powered by the Apocalypse is really good at is letting you take on a character. But if you were to take like an OSR system, you don't really take on the role of a character in those games. You are the character. You make the choices you would make. You do the things that you would do. And the story really comes from, you people at the table interacting with the world. Whereas Powered by the Apocalypse, you get to take on one of these playbooks and kind of take that on as a character, like an archetype, like a role in like a script in a television show. And that can be really fun. I always think it's really fun to think about the different things that these characters could do, what I would do with these different characters. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be seeing exactly what kind of story it's trying to tell with its moves, with its playbooks, and then with its principles and agendas. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to start by reading some of these main concepts, starting with who you are. In Armour Astir, you're rebels, mercenaries, and revolutionaries. You might be a channeler, someone with the ability and training to control an Astir, a humanoid construct of magic and metal, some of which stand 10 times the height of their pilots. You might be a paradigm, who gained that power through devout service, a witch who made a pact in their darkest hour, or an imposter who seized magic for their own at a cost. You might be the kind better suited to life outside of a suit of magical armor, of course. You might be a scout trained by the Authority, who left to fight back. an artificer who grew up keeping things working around their hometown, or a diplomat who made a name for themselves holding factions together. Whoever you are, you represent something. This might be a small group, a company, or simply an ideology. But whatever it is referred to as the cause. Okay, that's interesting. I like the tone this is setting. It's definitely kind of rooted in that Star Wars style rebellion versus the Empire. And I also like that it has listed what I assume are the playbooks here for us, the witch, the paradigm, and that not all of the playbooks revolve around being a pilot. So you will have characters who pilot these mechs, these Astirs, and you will have characters who do not. It gives it that Mobile Suit Gundam, the original series with Armour Ray and White Base. That sort of vibe where you will have people who are still part of the story and very much affecting the story, but they will not be the ones in the giant suits fighting the, what do they call it, the authority. So that's interesting. Let's move on to the next section, who they are. The exact nature of the authority is up to you and everyone else at the table. But the authority is generally an authoritarian group, usually in a grand position of power, that seeks to control and subjugate people who do not fall in line. There is no need for things to be entirely black and white in regards to the motivations of individuals. But as a general whole, the authority should represent something you, as players, are interested in fighting back against. So yeah, the Empire. That's great. I like that it's not a specific thing. Like, they have not created the Empire that you must, as the director, follow. You and everybody else at the table gets to decide exactly what this is. That sort of freedom may seem like an obvious choice to some, but that sort of freedom can be really helpful in letting people set their own vibe at the table. And then finally we have the third section of the main concepts, what you're doing. It looks like everything is split into two sorts of categories. You have downtime and then what they're calling sorties. And downtime is where you spend your free time to repair, rest, and rendezvous. And sorties are where you leave the carrier, and that's capitalized, the carrier, together to try to achieve a goal. And then I guess the sorties can be something smaller, like it could be individually framed sections of action, like scenes in a movie or TV show. Or a larger goal could be referred to as a mission, which is typically achieved over the course of a few sorties. So a sortie is kind of like a smaller mission, and they give some examples like venturing out to defend the carrier against attackers, while a mission might be a broader, longer-term goal, like disrupting a major military operation. Powered by the Apocalypse games tend to do this, where they separate your time. They put words behind the different sections of the game, which is part of the reason why I always kind of think of them like television pitches, because you can already start to see how an episode would go. You would usually start with downtime, and you'd have all the characters interacting and their personal drama, and then, there would be a sortie that would come in, and then everybody would get in their mechs or do whatever their job is supposed to be, and the action would sort of personify that personal drama that launched the episode. In the main concept section, the game starts to tell us about exactly what you're going to be doing as a player. And since it's powered by the Apocalypse, you're going to be rolling 2d6 and then adding one of your stats, which they are calling traits. And the traits are Defy, Sense, Clash, Talk, and Know. And empowered by the Apocalypse, I think more so than like an OSR game, the traits/stats are indicative of how your character can solve problems. Unlike in, say, Dungeons and Dragons, where you are given very broad things like strength, dexterity, wisdom, intelligence, and you can put different points in them that allow you to kind of focus on those various areas, but you can use strength in various different ways. Whereas in Powered by the Apocalypse, they give you specific ideas, like Defy. That is the ability to resist pressure and power through adversity. So your character, who is going to be defying things, or you're going to be bad at defying things because, your stats will get a bonus or a modifier that is a bonus or a negative. Each of these things are things that your character will either be good at or bad at. And that can really help shape the flow of the story and how you interact with your own character, how you make choices with your character. And you can start to see Powered by the Apocalypse is very rooted in its own language. And every game kind of rewrites that language, though typically keeps a lot of the same building blocks. So like you can, if you're looking at the book along with me here, some of the words and phrases are bolded, italicized, capitalized, and that tells you that they are moves or part of a playbook, or maybe even like a director's move or something like that. Like Bite the Dust is bolded and italicized, and that tells me that that's probably a move of some kind. And that's something that could be both a positive and a negative, at least for me, when reading Powered by the Apocalypse games, because the language can kind of get in the way, I feel. It's a lot of things that you have to learn, a lot of things you have to rewrite. Like if I was coming from even just Apocalypse World, they would not exactly have the same moves that would be present in this game. So while the basics, the 2d6 add a stat/trait, are kind of carried over, it's really the moves and the playbooks that kind of change the tone between games. After the traits, we are given hooks. Each player should write up 3 hooks. These might be beliefs, goals, or burdens. Hooks are things that color and inform the things your character does. A hook might pull you to something new, or another might be something your character struggles to break free of. When you take action that requires you to sacrifice, outgrow, or otherwise conclude one of your hooks, cross that hook off. You may then immediately take an advancement and act with confidence if the hook was deep. So this is a good example of what I was talking about with the language. There are hooks, that's already being explained here, but then you can act with confidence, which is color-coded green, which means acting with confidence is like a move. It is something that you choose to do. They are not simply telling you to act with confidence. They are saying, if you use this move, then this happens. And then it also says, if the hook was deep, and that is italicized, the deep. So deep is sort of a modifier to a hook, which I think means, here it describes it. Deep hooks cannot be rewritten forcibly or otherwise. So a deep hook is something that your character is firmly rooted in. And I don't see, it might be further explained in the playbooks, but I do not see any rules for coming up with hooks if you have to choose certain things, or if you have the freedom to kind of create them on your own. Either one I think could be very interesting. If the playbooks give you certain hooks to choose from, that kind of furthers the character building of each playbook. But if you are able to sort of handcraft each one of your hooks yourself, that allows you personally to further develop your own character, your own idea of the character for each playbook. Moving on to Spotlight. Whenever you fail a move, you may take a point of Spotlight. Once you have 6 Spotlight, you may spend it at any time to take center stage. Okay, so it looks like the hooks and the Spotlight are 2 different ways to advance. Spotlight is simply a fail forward sort of thing. If you fail enough times, you can take an advancement, and then you may act with confidence. And still, I'm not entirely sure what acting with confidence is. I believe, actually, yeah. Okay, so up here, they talk about advantage and disadvantage, and then they talk about confidence and desperation. So let's read over this confidence and desperation and just kind of see exactly what that is. Additionally, you might also sometimes be asked to act with confidence or in desperation. When acting with confidence, you are almost assured of your success. Treat any dice result of a 1 as a 6 instead. And then when acting in desperation, it is the opposite. Okay, so it's sort of like a modified version of advantage and disadvantage, which they also have in this game. So you can have advantage and confidence, which I think is fine. Like, I don't think that's too complicated or anything like that. Basically, if you're acting in confidence, you are way more likely to succeed. Actually, more than that, you are far less likely to fail, because the lowest you can roll is a 2 on a dice, which could still lead to failure, but it is a lot less likely. And when you're acting in desperation, it is a lot easier for you to fail, or less likely for you to fully succeed and instead only partially succeed. Right now I'm getting the idea that this game is heavily character driven. It is not supposed to be reliant on the dice, and I think that's furthered here. I'm looking at this next section called Gravity, and it says gravity clocks represent relationships and attachments you have with people and with groups. So it looks like similar to Blades in the Dark with their clocks mechanic. You will be filling out these clocks, but instead of dealing with like physical timers, you are dealing with relationships to other people. So this game looks to already be heavily leaned towards the players and their characters, and that's what's important. And I think if you were to, again, if I'm going to make this comparison just because it's easy to make, if you were to look between this and Lancer, I'm sure you would find a stark contrast there, where Lancer probably focuses more on the crunch, as they call it, the dice rolling, the combat, the mech building. This game is taking the more, like I said before, anime approach, where the characters are taking center stage, and it is more about their drama with each other, with other pilots, and with their mechs that is going to be interesting. And I think it's also important to note I almost said important to notice the gravity of the gravity, but it is important to notice how much space on the page the book gives to the gravity clocks. Again, another signifier that this is important. It needs to be explained more, it needs to be given more time, because this will be something that your characters rely on. This is something that will be integral to the game. Then we get on to dangers, which I believe, it looks like it is the game's version of like health, hit points, things like that. Reading it over real quick, it appears to be that you take a certain amount of dangers until you are defenseless. Again, that is another like language thing. So defenseless is sort of like a status that you take on. And when you take a certain amount of dangers, you become defenseless, which means your usual methods of avoiding harm aren't available. And if you were at that point to take more dangers, you would instead roll to bite the dust. So now we're finally seeing what that bite the dust is. We still don't have the move kind of like written out for us, but bite the dust is obviously some sort of confrontation of death or severe injury, and basically you can take a certain amount of dangers before that becomes a risk. And we can see here where desperation comes into play too. It says, if you take a risk but already have 3 dangers. Oh, what's risks? Let's look. Where do they mention risks? So it says, the dangers that make it harder to defend yourself come in 2 kinds. Risks, which are temporary things that can be resolved during a sortie. And then it gives an example, like having the low ground during a fight or being on fire. And then there are perils, which are more permanent issues that must be solved during downtime, like a serious injury to you or your Astir. They also mention, which I think is very adorable, being heartbroken. That is a peril that must be solved during downtime. I love that. That makes me fall in love with this game just a little bit. You know, you got me with the art, now you're kind of getting me with this focus on character, and now you're getting me with being heartbroken as being as devastating as being seriously injured. I love it. So yeah, that's what risks and perils are. And so down here with where desperation comes in to play, so backtracking a bit, if you take a risk but already have 3 dangers, replace one with a peril. Okay, if you would be put in peril but already have 3 dangers, replace a risk with it if you have one. Otherwise, bite the dust in desperation until the end of the sortie. Okay, so you're making a bite the dust roll in desperation, which means replacing all 6s with 1s. So basically it's almost like, this might sound obvious to say out loud, but not all games handle it like this. The more risks you take, like the more hits you take, the easier it is for you to then take even more hits and be in more danger. If you think of like the typical like D&D character, they have hit points, and the lower your hit points are doesn't affect anything. You know, if you have 1 hit point, if you have 20 hit points, the most that's going to change is how you as a person decide what to do, but it doesn't change anything with your dice rolls or how your character acts. So I think this is sort of a way of like a snowball way of doing it. You know, you start to take damage, and now you are a snowball rolling down a hill until eventually it spirals out of control. So the game, in its own way, is pushing you towards biting the dust. So I kind of want to find out what Bite the Dust is, because if it's a game focused on character, and then it's also snowballing you towards biting the dust in desperation, I'm curious what Bite the Dust is. I'm assuming it's not death. I'm assuming it's not facing death. So I'm curious exactly what they're going to do there. So let's scroll down a bit. We have the setting up section of the game. It says setting up for a game of Armour Astir Advent is simple and consists of defining some key elements of the world you'll be playing in, building up the player characters, and figuring out what your first mission together will be. So this is about creating the setting, and they give you some examples, which I think is great, because like they have in parentheses different things like Mobile Suit Gundam, Warframe, Vision of, what's that, Escaflowne? Yeah, Escaflowne. Vision of Escaflowne. So you can kind of look at this and go, oh, hey, what kind of show are we trying to emulate right now? Are we trying to play Evangelion? Are we trying to play Mobile Suit Gundam? You know, are we trying to play, you know, Gurren Lagann? And you can kind of use the group's references to media as a way to create the world for the game. That's fun. I like that. Yeah, we'll move on to the section called Creating the Authority. Then it gives you some questions that you should, or you can, ask and answer to create what the authority is. But then again, if you're kind of going off the setting up stage, you can kind of use the group's knowledge of certain media to create the authority as well. Like you could simply just sit down and say, it's the Empire. You know, this is, maybe it's our version of a Star Wars world, maybe it's not, but it's the Empire. We'll read some of the questions here just so you can kind of get a clue what the game thinks is important for the authority to do. So first question, what do the people of the authority value? What do the people of the authority hate? What is hypocritical about the authority? Does the authority have a standard or mass-produced Astir? So they're very leading questions, and I like that. There is no way to frame the authority as accidentally evil. They are evil, and I like some of the leading questions that make you maybe think about something that you didn't think about before, like, does the authority have a standard or mass-produced Astir? Basically, you just quickly create the authority, and then we can scroll on down to the cause. And I'm assuming the cause could easily just be a reflection of the anti-authority, the rebellion. And then it also gives you questions like, how much of a secret is the cause? What do people within the cause disagree over? Does the cause have a standard or mass-produced Astir? It's the same questions. That is, I like that framing. I like that the cause could also be something that you don't agree with, but you're fighting with it because the authority is, well, the authority, and they must be stopped. Now we get into creating player characters, and it follows a lot of the same things that you will have seen in other Powered by the Apocalypse games, like you choose a playbook, a name, a look, your gear, your traits, your moves, and your hooks. Okay, so I kind of want to read this hooks part, just because I was curious about that to begin with. So you should come up with up to 3 hooks for your character. If you're just playing a one-shot or playing a character you won't return to for other reasons, and won't be bothering with advancements, you don't need them, but they still might help you decide how your character acts. And then it gives you some extra things to consider, and it's mostly your relationship with the cause and your the things that you might have suffered under by the authority. And then it says we're ready to play. I like this art. This art that I'm seeing here, it's on page 16, right under the ready to play header. It is of 4 characters kind of standing in different poses. And I like it because, especially this middle guy, it looks very much like a Berserk character, which creates this sort of clash of styles between the fantasy and the sci-fi that even just simply having these characters that look like this in a world with mechs should already get your brain kind of rolling on the kind of world it is and make you yourself be asking questions about how does this work? What are these people doing? And stuff like that. So that's fun. Again, I think the art in this book is spectacular. Okay, here's where we get to the meat of the game, the moves. If the traits told us how your character solves problems, the moves are going to tell us what solving those problems looks like. So let's just go down the line and we'll read them and we'll see exactly what kind of tone this is giving us, because we need to remember, a move is something that is triggered or something that you choose to do. And it means that anything that is a move, you can either fail, partially succeed, or succeed at. And that's what the story is about. So, for instance, the first move is Weather the Storm. When you weather the storm to do something safely under pressure, you roll +1 of your traits. On a 10+, so a success, you manage to make it safely. On a partial success, you succeed, but at some cost. Your director will ask you to settle for less, take a risk, or make a difficult choice. And then failure, of course, is failure. So right there already gives us a little bit of what the tone is going to be. You are going to play a character who is trying to do things safely under pressure, and failing, partially failing, and succeeding are going to shape the story for your character. I just want to stress the importance, because that's what I feel is the most paramount thing in regards to Powered by the Apocalypse. It is the moves. What moves the writers have chose to give you as a player, because that will tell you where the story is. The second of the basic moves is Read the Room. When you read the room to get insight on your situation, roll +sense. So you're going to be playing a character who is trying to get insight on their situation through observation. That's important because that's something that you can fail. You can fail at getting insight on your situation, and that is part of the story. You know, a move is not something that you're supposed to always succeed. The next move is Dispel Uncertainties. When you dispel uncertainties by clarifying something unknown or answering a question, roll +no. So again, you're going to be playing a character who cannot always clarify things. You will not always be able to give people the answer to the questions they're asking. You will not always be able to let people know something that they don't know. And that causes drama. So already with just those three, or even just Read the Room and Dispel Uncertainties, you're going to be playing characters who cannot always communicate and cannot always understand the situation. To me, that puts me in the head of like somebody who's younger, like a child pilot or something. That's just me. I'm sure other people will have different reactions to that and to what kind of character they want to make in relation to that. But I think that is really fascinating. Already we know that there's a focus on character, but that there's also a focus on communication. Even if you and your friends at the table can communicate fine, your characters are going to struggle with it, and they are not always going to succeed. Help or hinder. When you help or hinder someone to influence their attempts to do something, roll 1 of your stats. So you're going to be trying to help people, or you can try to help people. That's one of your basic moves. So you're somebody who is trying to help or hinder. That seems a little more basic, but I think in relationship to the focus on characters, it's very important. It's important if you choose to help or if you choose to hinder. And it kind of groups that into one move, kind of showing you that there's like a 2 sides of the coin thing going on here. Then there's Weave Magic, which uses the channel ability, which I'm sure we'll learn more about later on. That's probably the one thing that I'm not too sure of at this point, is what does magic have to do with the setting or with the game? Cool Off. When you take a moment in safety to cool off or help someone else do the same, declare a risk you want to get rid of and roll whatever trait seems most appropriate. Exchange Blows. When you exchange blows with foes capable of defending themselves, you roll a stat, and you advance a gravity clock if you have one. That's interesting. strike decisively. When you strike decisively against someone who is defenseless, roll plus clash or plus talk, whichever is most appropriate. Fighting is one thing, and it is handled through exchanging blows. But when somebody is defenseless, you cannot just exchange blows with them. You must choose to strike decisively. So harming somebody who is defenseless is a choice. It is not assumed by the game that you're going to exchange blows until you kill them. Exchanging blows is assumed. You fighting happens, but to strike decisively is a choice you must take. Then we finally get to bite the dust. We can finally learn what bite the dust is. When you're defenseless or risk harm so severe you might bite the dust, roll plus defy. On a 10+, they miss, hesitate, or you're saved by sheer luck. On a 7 through 9, retreat from the sortie safely. On a fail, that strike sure was decisive. Decide with your director the consequences of what has happened to you, what was damaged, what have you lost, who and what is changed by your defeat. If you survive, so death is a choice that you must make, you are changed by your defeat. As well as the above, choose one, and then you can choose to deepen all of your hooks, loosen all of your hooks, or choose a new playbook entirely. So this is what the game is leading you towards. All the time the game is pushing you towards biting the dust. It is pushing you towards making a drastic decision. It is pushing you to making a change so great that you switch playbooks and basically become a different character, or deepen or loosen all of your hooks, all of the things that make your character advance. So it is a game that is about character, that is pushing you towards this moment of biting the dust. It is a game that is built off of communication and possibly failing to communicate, and fighting, where death is a choice. This definitely feels like an anime. I'm sure you're getting the same vibe now, but this feels like an anime, and I'm really liking it. I'm really liking where this game's going. Now, we're only a short way through the game at this point, so we're going to go a little quicker here, because we're already like a good 30-40 minutes in. And I know you all want to take a break eventually. This is interesting. The next section we can actually kind of skip over, but it's important for maybe those of you who are having trouble understanding the moves. But it gives each move its own page that explains more in depth what each one is for. It even gives you director notes and then examples. So each move is given one of those. So let's go ahead. We're going to go ahead and scroll past that just because I feel like we talked about the moves enough and we have a pretty good grasp on what that means. They say there's a oh no, there's a special moves section here. And one of the special moves is called B-plot. This game is really leaning into what I find so fascinating about Powered by the Apocalypse things here. It says, when you take part in the B-plot, rather than be involved in a sortie, name 1 or 2 director characters that accompany you and hold 3. During the sortie, you may spend it 1 for 1 to do the following. So you get 3. It's some kind of currency. Then you can spend each one to do one of these. Give another player an increased level of success on their next move, but complicate things for yourself. Deny a director character from appearing during the sortie. They're busy, possibly with the same thing as you. Spend some time and take a downtime move, which I'm sure we'll read about later. Or cut away from the sortie during a moment when time is precious, giving everyone room to think. Okay, I think this game sold me at this point. I am in love. I am in love. This sounds so much fun. I would always do the B plot. I will pick a character who does not pilot a mech, who's maybe a bit of a schlub, and I will do the B plot. I will be the goofy guy that you cut to, who's doing God knows what. to buy you some time to make those tough choices. That is great. That is so great. I love that so much. Scrolling down to the downtime moves. So downtime, it says between sorties, player characters have time to themselves on the carrier to rest, recuperate, and do their own thing. This is referred to as downtime. Each player may make 2 moves per downtime, or unless something specifies otherwise. But before you can do that, everyone should take a moment to check in. So everybody has a moment to kind of just check in with each other. That's great. And then you can choose one of these downtime moves, and there's quite a few. I'll just kind of read the titles of them because I think they kind of give themselves away through the title. They're not overly complicated. There's over here, talk it out, mend something, shore leave, or work on a project. Then there's also plan and prepare. So yeah, those sound like pretty typical things. I like how each one could be a scene. You can see it, or at least I can see it in my head as a scene in like an anime, in a mech show. Especially something like Talk It Out. That sounds like it would be fun to do. Take the Talk It Out, have a bit of a, role-play session with one of the other characters or several of the other characters, and have some fun with it. That's wonderful. Then we move into the playbooks, and we have channelers and the supports. The channelers are the pilots, the arcanist, the imposter, the paradigm, and the witch. And the supporters are the people who do not pilot the mechs, and they are the scout, the captain, the artificer, and the diplomat. When it comes to a playbook, what I'm looking for most is character. Does this playbook make me want to play it? And it looks like each playbook is kind of split up into several different sections. You have the looks, their approach, their gear, their starting moves, and then there's some additional moves. So those are going to be what they use to tell each other apart and make each one unique. So the Arcanist, we'll only read a couple of these because reading all of them would take too much time, and you should probably, be able to read them yourself as well. The Arcanist. Disciplined students of arcane magic who practice their talents for years before graduating to the cockpit of an Astir. Their looks are smart, bookish, wily, anxious, or imposing. It says that they wear pilot jumpsuit, military uniform, dress uniform, fancy robes. Your magic is like roaring elements, bright and neon, abstract and formless. When you launch your Astir, you say, so it gives you like something, it lets you kind of create your own catchphrase for when you launch in your mech. That's great. Your approach, when fighting on foot, your approach is arcane and elemental, or arcane or elemental, and you choose one. And then like the Arcanist gear, stuff like a telescoping staff, a regent knife, a sidearm, and a shield brooch. Okay, so yeah, there's another good example here of them mixing the fantasy with the sci-fi. You can have a staff, or you can have a sidearm. Those both exist here. It doesn't need to be explained. That's just how the world works, which is nice. I like that. Their starting moves are plan and prepare rituals. And so plan, Arcanists are educated in the art of war and fight according to preordained tactics. Okay, whenever the party enters a dangerous situation, declare your plan to resolve it. And then it gives you different things for advancement, different things for when you level up. I have to say, just from reading this first playbook, I'm not exactly sold on it. I feel like I definitely got a lot more character from the basic moves and learning some of the rules to approaching the game, whereas the playbook, I'm not really getting much from it. Like, I get it that they're kind of the bookish, the good student, but that's really all I'm getting from it. Like, the moves don't really give me like a spark. They don't make me want to jump on this character and play them. Scrolling down, though, there's 2 really great pieces of art here. One for the Arcanist, which has this darker-skinned woman with big, poofy hair with white streaks along the side, so she's older. She has these nice glasses, these gloves with a armored pointer finger, and these 2 arcane books that are kind of floating in front of her with another one strapped on her side. And her robes are kind of etched with these geometric lines and patterns, with this big runic ribbon that seems to be wrapping around her waist and coming down towards her boots. And then an image of the imposter, which looks more like a punk. It looks like a black woman with dreadlocks and scars on her forehead, her face, her chest, her arms. She's buff. She has the skeletal arm with 2 additional arms kind of coming out of it, and the end of the arm is turning into this like fiery claw, and she is wearing like this tank top and these like military cargo pants with these spiked boots. Putting them side by side really gives you a grasp on how wide the characters can really be. You have the one who's the bookish pilot, and then you have this one who looks like just a straight up badass. It's wonderful. Let's pick one of the playbooks from the supports to read. There's the captain, who again, the captain and the diplomat both have really great illustrations. The artificer, we'll read the last one, the scout. Scouts are straightforward people, trained in navigating any terrain and pathfinding for less mobile troops. Scouts are often the eyes and ears for their Astir allies. You look wild, cold, sharp, cocky, or brash. You wear gleaming plate, well-worn uniform, survivalist gear, or rugged leathers. You fight with brute strength, dexterous moves, practiced discipline, raw tenacity. When fighting on foot, your approach is mundane. So you're not really given a choice like you were with the first one we read. You have some gear, your scout weapons, scout equipment, and some questions. But the starting moves, let's see, the field scout. You're an expert at managing operations in the field. You're agile and strong. You tend to notice things those in Astirs don't. When you hold your own against Astirs or show yourself completely above the rank and file, advance a gravity clock with someone who sees you and is impressed. That's cute. I can already see the field scout out there doing something to throw off the enemy, and the person who has a crush on them sees them from the base and is like flustered. That's wonderful. But yeah, that's the scout. Again, I don't feel exactly enamored with any of the playbooks. I don't really feel as much character coming off of them as I got from just like the rules, like the basic moves. But like I said, the art is very good, and like they're not bad playbooks or anything, not by any regard. It feels very much like a good place to start and build your character off of. I was kind of maybe personally hoping for more defined character when coming into these playbooks. Moving on, we get this really great piece of art. It's black and white line art, very rough, very punk looking, with this big wooden dock sticking out towards a destroyed Astir, with the pilot in the cockpit, and they're speaking to, it looks like maybe the captain. And the Astir itself is just full of all this detail, up its arm, where the blasts have hit it, its helmet, its legs. It is very intricate looking, and it gives off this sense of scale that some of the other art to this point has not. We're getting into the like how you play this game section, and a lot of it I feel like isn't important for me to read out loud to you all, because a lot of it is like telling you exactly how you're going to be using the moves to play. Like here it says, as a game largely about getting into magical mechs and fighting fascism, much of the interaction between players and other characters will involve them in various kinds of conflict or negotiation, which, as we saw, you'll be exchanging blows, striking decisively if you choose to do so, and then trying to communicate, which, as we already covered, you will not always be successful with. It talks about ranges, approaches, how to like opposing with talk, so like debating, talking to God, it says. Oh, that sounds interesting. There are tiers, Astir tiers, 1 through 6 it looks like, and it looks like that's the size possibly here. Yeah, so like if you start at the tier 1, that covers any creature of around vaguely human strength and resilience. And then tier 6 is anything beyond carriers, like carrier ships. Lower versus higher tech, and then higher versus lower tech. Then it talks about their tags. So tags are things that get put onto weapons or abilities, and they split them up between mechanical tags that have, mechanical effects on them, as well as narrative implications, and then they have narrative tags, which do not have specific mechanical effects, but their descriptive nature could have mechanical effects. So like aquatic is a tag that an item or an Astir can have, and then it says that they can maneuver in water easily and might have an extended oxygen supply if an Astir. So yeah, these are sort of tags that can be given, and then you figure out exactly what they mean as you're playing. Then it goes through to talk about gear. We don't need to read through all the gear. That's something that you're going to be picking and finding as a character. I do want to talk about this art here, because what the fudge? This looks like an angel from the Bible. It looks like a very skinny lion with this metal, I want to call it a collar around its neck because it has a leash. It has a leash on the end of it. But the collar is very thick and metal, and its head is this column of stone with one eye surrounded by fire and floating swords. So that is wonderful. I love that. That was beautiful. There's a full color illustration of two Astirs fighting. It talks about the carriers. We can kind of scroll through this stuff because this stuff isn't exactly important in helping us set the scene. I think for the most part we have covered all the important things from the game, the things that will either sell you on the game or make you want to try something different. Oh my gosh, this art. I think, honestly, if I'm just 100% serious, if the game doesn't sound fun to you so far, you should probably still pick it up just to look at this art. Art is hugely influential on my mind, and looking at these mechs gets my mind working overdrive. This mech here on page 86, it's in full color, and it is holding a huge stone slab as a piece of armor, and it itself looks like a temple that has been animated. It is wonderful. And this book is just full of art like this. Like even just on the next page, there is this knight holding this big ball of energy with a nice broadsword kind of slung over his back and a rifle on his hip. Then you have another one on the next page that looks like a shattered gem with its different body parts floating disconnected from each other, but still obviously connected through some kind of magic. It's beautiful stuff. Like this, you show me the character stuff, you show me that this is based particularly in character interaction, and then you show me these mechs, and I am ready to play this game. I am so ready. I would run this game in a heartbeat. And there are so many mechs. This one looks like a salamander. It's called the Medusa. It looks like a salamander, so a snake body, human top, with this very intense looking halberd as a weapon. It's beautiful. I love it. Then it talks about advancement. We've already kind of covered that just through reading. How to get new moves. I think that just about covers what I want to look at when looking at this game. So yeah, my overall first impression of this book is that it is very much a game about characters failing to communicate with each other and the problems that can and cannot be solved through that communication. It's about fighting back against, as they described, fascism, against the authority. It's about being under the boot and having to fight your way out, and maybe not always having what you need to be able to do that. I think that's a pretty powerful framing for a game. I think a lot of people can relate to that, either through the media that they watched growing up or through the life that we're living right now. Not to say that games need to call on that sort of personal attachment to the real world, but I think for what this game is, it does a damn good job of doing that in a way that is empowering, fun even. You can explore some of these feelings that you're probably having right now in a safe environment and not just doom scrolling on Twitter. And perhaps you can make a difference. And if you can make a difference in a fictional environment and it makes yourself feel better, then you can take that energy into the real world and make a difference there. That got kind of deep there. But I think we're going to wrap it up here. I had a great afternoon reading this book and talking about it with you all. I had a very nice cup of coffee with me. I hope you all take a break, stand up, stretch, and get back to work. Until next time, good luck. Don't die.